Well, happy Monday to everyone. It is indeed Monday, June 10th, 2024. We are here for a work session with Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources. I'm Kristen Stevens, Board Pro Tem, or Chair Pro Tem of the Larimer County Commissioners, and with me is my fellow Commissioner, Jody Shattuck McNally. We also have our Wow. It truly is a Monday. Our county manager, Lorenda Volker, and we have a whole team of folks with us from our Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources. I will turn it over to our Director of Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources, Leslie Ellis, and she can introduce the topics for today, and folks can introduce themselves as they speak. So welcome, everyone, and we're looking forward to it.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Leslie Ellis, Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources Director, and we do have several items on the agenda today from Community Development and Natural Resources primarily, and then some updates. So I will go ahead and pass it along to Rebecca Everett for the first item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Everett, Community Development Director. The first item today is discussion of the annual cost of living adjustment for our development review and building fees. So as I'm sure you recall, this is an annual adjustment that we do in community development to match the consumer price index increase. So that is what we benchmark to. And we historically have adjusted the building permit fees every year based on that consumer price index. And starting this year, we are adding in the planning and engineering development review fees. And I know a couple weeks ago you looked at the transportation capital expansion fees, which relate to kind of impacts to our transportation system from new development. In this case, in this item, we're just talking about the development review fees, the cost to review plans and process development plans. So when we talk about engineering fees in that sense, we're not talking about the separate transportation capital expansion fees. We're just talking about development review fees. And so this was a decision that the commissioners, you all made back in December when you adopted the new fee schedule for planning and engineering development review, that those fees would then tie into the same annual update for cost of living adjustments as the building fees. So this is more of an FYI that we plan to make those adjustments starting July 1st for building, planning, and engineering development review. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Oh, I should have mentioned the amount of the increase. So the increase this year is fortunately less than it was last year, but it's 5.22% is the increase to the fees this time around.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions? I guess the only question I have is, do we feel like that CPI adequately covers the costs that we're seeing? I mean, I think this is largely a lot of probably staff time in a way versus, buying materials, which can sometimes go up. But do we feel like that CPI measure is adequately reflects what, our costs?
We haven't done an analysis that ties it directly into the cost. You're correct that staffing is the primary cost. We have postcard mailings and some things like that are miscellaneous expenditures that happen, but it really is tied to staffing, and the cost of staffing has remained relatively stable from last year to this year with some kind of pay increases. So this does relatively match those increases that we see in our staffing costs. We will do a periodic fee study every 3 years, I think is our cadence, to take a look at the planning and engineering fees to make sure it's still appropriately capturing our costs. We're also looking at process improvements constantly and looking for ways to streamline our processes so they don't cost as much to administer, and trying to then match the fees back to what the cost of administration actually looks like. So over time, we hope that there are some fees that might actually come down as we find some efficiencies in our processes, while other fees may continue to increase with that cost of living.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Having those process improvements, I mean, at least could stabilize some of those fees, and we wouldn't have to see increases every year. So but certainly want to capture those, the costs that staff has. So thank you for explaining that. And I remembered that we had some sort of cadence for reviewing the fees, but it's every 3 years for these.
Yes, I can double check that, but I believe we would start looking at that again in either 2025 or 2026 for implementation the following year.
Sounds great. Thank you. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Madam Chair Pro Tem. I appreciate that. Your question triggered a question for me when we talked about costs and efficiencies. Is that also efficiency, just how, I know we are also looking at that metric of how long it takes to get through the process and timing and things. And I know those are very complex because sometimes it depends on how the applicant is engaging as well. So I'm just curious, is that also part of this 3-year review and some of the work? I'm assuming it is, that you're looking also for timing and efficiencies. And haven't we already found lots of efficiencies in shortened times in the last few years is my recollection, and just wondering if you could refresh me. And so 2 questions there.
Yes, our goal of improving our processes, streamlining and finding those efficiencies that's been a goal for many years, and probably will always continue to be an effort as codes change and legislation changes, and we're looking to continually evaluate the work that we do and how we can best deliver those services to the community. So yes, we have found a lot of ways to improve our processes, improve our customer service, and there's still plenty of work that we could do to further improve.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there's nothing further on this item, is there?
There's nothing
Okay.
further on this. So
Wonderful. Well,
thank
it
you.
sounds like we're supportive, and thank you for reminding us and bringing this forward. Appreciate it. So looks like we're on to item number 2.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Megan and Jen are here, so Megan Flanagan and Jen Almstead from Natural Resources.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Megan Flanagan with Natural Resources. And we were asked to come and share with you a little bit more about a grant we recently received from the Bureau of Reclamation that you were notified about. And we thought it would be a good opportunity to share with you actually the last 5 years and sort of a sum total and look back at what some of our grants and partnerships have looked like. And then we've been really successful this year with several grants actually already in 2024. So with that, I'll turn over to Jen Almstead to walk us through that.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Jen Almstead, Fund Development and Project Specialist with Larimer County's Department of Natural Resources. Just wanted to take a few minutes, as Megan mentioned, just to go through some of the grants that we've secured over the past 5 to 6 years, and this includes grants, partnerships, and landowner donations. So we thought we would just kind of quickly summarize that and then talk through, like Megan said, some of the 2024 commitments already for this year. So the next slide depicts since 2018, the Department of Natural Resources has secured $26.1 million through grants, partnerships, and landowner donations. Grants represent roughly 64% of the total, 30% with landowner donations, and 30% with partnerships and 6% with landowner donations. And funding percentages certainly can vary from year to year depending on what land acquisition, capital construction, or restoration projects are taking place. But the landowner donations is when a property owner decides to donate a portion or the entire appraised value of the conservation easement in pursuant of tax credits. Partnerships most often are partnerships for specific projects that can be used as matching dollars with grants to leverage those dollars even further. And then the grants represent, a competitive application process, requesting funds for a specific project or program. And as just mentioned, in the Department of Natural Resources case, it's focused on land acquisition, capital construction, and restoration projects. The next slide just shows you the breakdown per year between grants and partnerships. And the funding sources, again, can vary from year to year. And in each year, the blue represents grants and the orange represents partnerships. So again, those can vary. But for example, in 2018, we received some funds from DOLA, GOCO, and CPW. And then we had a significant partnership from Fort Collins that year. And then 2019 is the FLAP grant. So that's where we were able to secure funding for a lot of paving work out at Carter Lake and Horsetooth Reservoir. 2020 is the Skyview Campground is one example of a grant, and then the Poudre River Trail as well. And then most recently in 2023, the Bureau of Reclamation, Colorado State Forest Service, and CYCA, GOCO, funded grants for 2023. And then moving into 2024, so far we've secured a little over $3 million. Bureau of Reclamation has been a significant grant partner, funding a lot of different projects at Carter Lake and Horsetooth Reservoir, which includes the $150,000 that we were recently notified. And so this 1.5 from the Bureau really spans about 5 to 6 different grant projects. But again, they encompass the reservoir properties. Great Outdoors Colorado, as you're aware, we secured $1.5 million for Heaven's Door, or Heaven's Door Ranch as part of the Centennial Program. And then Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we've secured a couple grants, including adding additional trail crew members for through their trail stewardship program to help with additional trail maintenance backlog. So overall, this just kind of shows you what's secured to date. We do intend to hopefully secure grants for Chimney Hollow Open Space that'll be coming online soon as well. And then we just had a final slide that just shows the amount of grant dollars leveraged. So between 2018 and 2023, for every dollar the department spent on acquisition projects, $1.41 was secured through grants, partnerships, and landowner donations. And again, this is just for acquisitions specifically. But it gives you, I guess, a bigger picture of the partnerships and grants that DNR has secured over the past few years.
It looks like Commissioner Shattuck McNally has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair Pro Tem. I'm sorry to break your stride there, Jen. You're doing a great job, and I have one comment, one question real quick. So obviously, the numbers are showing all your fantastic work that you guys have leveraged our taxpayers' money, being good stewards and leveraging almost 1.5 times of every sales tax dollar that our public have supported us. You guys have leveraged to pretty much more than doubled to make sure that I think that's a really important number to share. And then my question is, you're going to go into the Bureau of Reclamation grant a little bit more in detail, or is that something we should ask about now?
Oh, yeah, feel free to ask about that now. That really concludes the presentation portion.
Great. So I'm just curious about reservoir improvements.
Sure.
Since this is for the recreation side, because I know also it's water storage, so reservoir improvements for recreation and not for water storage. Is that correct? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the work that the Bureau of Reclamation awards grants for 2 different types of projects. One is like capital improvement type projects. The other is for A&S. And so it's a combination of the two. So the $150,000 was an additional amount for the wash pad station the decon station up at Horsetooth Reservoir, just because we had some additional costs up there that we didn't anticipate. So the Bureau was helping to support that project. The other projects typically fall under their Title 28 funding pool, which is their capital construction or construction projects. So that includes a lot of, striping, bank stabilization, asphalt maintenance, installation of new boat docks. Rotary Park is also getting rebuilt. So it's a combination of a lot of different things, but it has to be on obviously Bureau of Reclamation property. But it's usually, the funding usually comes through either A&S or Title 28.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Jen. Thanks for explaining this. It's really remarkable work. It's great to leverage those dollars because while we have tax dollars coming in for open space, we don't have to just rely on that. And knowing that there's high costs for maintenance and other things that we need to do, it's really important that we get these grants. So that's. I mean, I think getting a total of what was the total amount, like $60 million or something in the past five or 6 years, is pretty remarkable. Yeah, I guess 16 million. Okay, is great because it's monies that we can use, additional monies that we can use to take care of these properties. One of the questions I had was with the Bureau of Reclamation. Were there any additional dollars that came in because of some of the infrastructure bills and some of the funding at the federal level, or are we just seeing around the same kind of dollars in those funding pots as we always have?
For the most part, we're seeing the same available in those funding pots, but we did have the opportunity, and we were awarded about $870,000 just this spring, which is part of that total you saw in the Bureau of Reclamation Reservoir Infrastructure Pot, to do some work on paving and access improvements at either Carter Lake or Horsetooth. And that was because some of the infrastructure money was funneled through the Bureau versus a larger group. So we actually took some of the projects that were initially part of FLAP, the Federal Land Access Program grant, that we weren't able to fund. We had a big laundry list, and we just did the highest priority ones, and we were able to go to that next tier down, and that's what we'll be putting in as a scope of work with that $870,000.
That's great. And then how do folks get updated on some of the projects that we're doing? Is this on the website then that people can take a look and see where we're spending some of these dollars?
Yeah, if you go to LarimerCountyNaturalResources.org, we have project sites for all of our active construction projects. So, for example, right now, the east side of Carter Lake, we've completed the design and are moving into putting out construction documents for bid this fall, and that project will take place starting 2025. And that schedule and what's involved, the designs are all up on our website.
That's great. I think people like to keep track of some of that kind of stuff. Sometimes they ask us, how's that project coming along? Where is it at? And so it's great to have that information. Not that they can't call us and ask, but just that it's good to be able to point them somewhere. Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your work. Between the grants and the partnerships, you all are doing a lot of work to build relationships and make sure this happens. So we're really grateful for that work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, it's back to me for Community Development Director updates. I have a couple today. First, just information on this afternoon's land use hearing. We have a 3 o'clock hearing today with one item on it. It is a request for a special event permit. Special event permits are typically decided by the director. This is one that we have chosen to elevate up to the Board of County Commissioners for a decision, given some of the community neighbor concerns and concerns from referral agencies. So you'll see that this afternoon. We anticipate that there may be some community comment on the item, and the applicant will be here to present on their event. So you should have received a couple emails today from Cassidy Fior, who is our newest senior planner, who will be presenting this item. I think it will be her first presentation to the commissioners, so you'll get to meet her, and we look forward to the conversation this afternoon.
Great, thank you. And that's the only item, I believe.
That is the only item.
Okay.
Correct.
Any questions, Commissioner?
No, thank you for that, and thank you for giving us a heads up about. I saw the emails for the new person, so it would be great to meet her today. So thanks for that information.
Great. All right, and then second, I'm going to ask Eric Freed to come up and provide a brief update on our project to update our building codes.
This is always on. Yep. Okay. As you know, every 3 years, the International Code Council publishes a new set of codes. This is the 24 codes this year. Normally, the codes come out early in the year. We review them and try to get them amended and reviewed and in place for the following year. We were already planning to wait a little longer than usual because the state for the first time is developing a model wildfire code at the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, which is not due out until next July, July 1st, 2025. The state is also developing a model energy code, which was due out June 1st. So the background to all this is that there was some controversy at the International Code Council about the energy code. There was an appeal to some of the provisions of the energy code, whether pushing for building electrification should be in the code or in the appendix. Anyway, the long and short of it is because that appeal took some time to play out, it really delayed publication of the energy code. And that's also delayed the work of a similar or a related committee in Fort Collins. We're trying to do this as a joint review with Fort Collins and Safe Built and some of the other building officials and municipalities. Well, Fort Collins also has a federal grant to develop its own energy code, a stretch code towards net zero by 2030. And because the International Energy Code got delayed, the work of that committee got delayed, the federal grant got delayed. So we had our first meeting last week, and the Fort Collins building official, Marcus Coldiron, suggested we might want to delay doing the review of the codes for about 6 months. That doesn't really affect us as much because we were already planning to review the codes and then put them aside and then wait for those other couple of codes and review that. So instead, it might be more of a seamless process for us, but everyone agreed rather than review the codes and then push them aside and wait for the energy code to come out and see how that looks and how it plays in with Fort Collins, the whole review thing has been put back probably till December or January 2025. So again, and the idea there is that we would still be reviewing, suggesting amendments, and having our code take effect January 1st, 2026, which is what some of the other safe-built towns were going to do anyway. Now it looks like Fort Collins is on the same page, whereas before, originally they wanted to have their energy code in place by next January. So it's actually very helpful, I think, to customers and contractors to have the code changes all go into effect at the same time. So it looks like us, Fort Collins, everyone will be putting their new codes in effect January 1st, 2026. But we just won't actually start the formal review for another 6 months, very end of this year, very end of next year, but that'll still fit within that time frame. So just wanted you all to know about that's the only possibility is if Marcus Coldiron brings it to his supervisors and elected officials and they say, oh no, we don't like it, then maybe we'll come back and change it. But it looks like we'll just start early next year, go through them, look at the state codes, and try to get it in effect for January 1st, 26.
Thank you, Eric. Questions? Commissioner?
Thank you, Eric. I think always thinking about how we can alleviate confusion and having lots of changes for folks at different times is important. And it's interesting and timely that we're talking about this today because I had some folks approach me sometime this weekend. It's all a blur right now, how many meetings I had. But they were online trying to learn about the code or trying to look at something they were trying to do, and we're trying to figure out what the rules were. And I don't know if, so I haven't looked because I haven't had time to look, but they were talking about that the codes, but there's also red line versions. And so their comment to me was, all you guys are doing is changing the codes all the time. And I'm like, no, I think that's not the case. And so I'm wondering is that how it's printed online, that there's the code and then there's red line versions in there so they can see what it was and now it's not, or what does that look like? Because I was trying to help them navigate that, but I just did not want to, I didn't have my phone with me. I wasn't trying to pull it up. I'm just curious what that looks like. And is there a clean version where they can just see what it is like today? Just curious because I haven't looked at it recently. So
It gets a little confusing for the layperson, but yeah, we put something up on our website that the 24 codes are coming with links to International Code Council so they can read the code. They can read both the code before it's amended. Of course, we're going to have some local amendments that will change it. But we also put a link up there to the red line version in case they want to look at what the changes are. And it just like with something that comes to you, it tracks what's been crossed out, what's been added, etc. If we get a lot of feedback that that's confusing, we could take the red line version down and just have it be, this is what the code says. And we also have online what our current amendments are. And it gives us more time now to try to do public engagement with what's in the code in case people have some opinion about what. Now, the thing is, the code does change every 3 years, and that's a national thing. So there's really not
Okay.
much we can do. But I have heard people say, and I don't disagree, that it would be nice if ICC only updated the codes every 5 years instead of every 3, because it would make it, you wouldn't have to, it would slow the process down. And for us, we're just now learning about what's in the 24 code, and they're already developing the 27 code. But that's not our call. I mean, it's a national organization, and their bread and butter is publishing codes, so I don't think they're going to go from 3 to 5 years. A lot of the smaller jurisdictions don't adopt every code. They skip a year because of the work involved. So a lot of the small jurisdictions around here didn't go to the 21s. They stayed on the 2018. They're going to go to the 24s, which is why we're almost all going to be on the same code, which is kind of nice. The downside of not changing it every 3 years, as we try to do, first of all, FEMA, when they look at grants, they make sure the entity is on the most current code, for one. Number two, if you skip a code cycle, you have more catching up to do, and it can be a harder thing than the incremental. But anyway, so yeah, we do publish online the red line version of the code change too for people's information.
Okay, that's helpful, and I appreciate that. And we'll follow up back up with them. Now my brain is caught up with my question, and I'm like, okay, I remember exactly who was talking to me now. So I'll follow back up with them and share that with them, and then I'll encourage them to call your office and their office and help them navigate some concerns. So, all right, I appreciate that. That's helpful, really helpful to help me. I can now better prepared for explaining that we're not changing codes constantly. So,
and the other thing to keep in mind is, and I know some people will give us comments that, well, especially on the energy side, it's too strict, why are we doing it? But the state is coming out with a model energy code, which will be the minimum, just like the minimum wildfire code. So I don't want to give people the false impression that if we get a lot of feedback that it's too much, we might not do it, because we don't really have any choice, just like the electrical code. That is the minimum. We can go beyond it, but we can't be less than it anyway. And so we won't, we'll be at or above whatever the energy and wildfire codes are.
it's really helpful. Thank you.
So with that, do we necessarily have to adopt everything that the ICC? But we do have to. We have that. Though there are some choices there, but there would be no choices with what the state adopts.
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
Right. And we don't adopt every ICC code. We adopt about 8 of them, and there's a whole bunch more. That's up to us, other than whatever the state decides is the minimum that we have to adopt.
And can you remind me who? So it sounds like City of Fort Collins is involved. Do we bring in like builders and there's a panel from the community
there,
okay,
and Structural Engineers Association of Colorado. We try to bring in architects. We try to invite commercial contractors. They typically don't come because their attitude seems to be whatever the code requires, we'll do it and we'll pass it on to our customers. It's the home builders who are really concerned, and so there's several of those. There are about 4 or 5 of those. We bring in the fire departments. If there's other people we want to specifically invite, we can do that to be part of this. And the difference now is we have ourselves, as well as Fort Collins and Safe Builds is listening in, and people at least from the City of Boulder, Rob Adrians is listening in, and some others, and we're just trying to all get on the same page as much as possible.
Yeah, I think all those voices are important, and we've definitely talked about trade-offs kind of when we've decided what to adopt is, right? I mean, costs and the burden of, mostly costs, I guess, honestly, to build to the new standards, right? I mean, so that's, right. I mean, those are good conversations to have. We can decide where we want to move the needle, but I think having those voices in the room is important for us to, as we're thinking about housing. With the City of Fort Collins being given some dollars to do sort of their stretch, so it sounds like their energy code might be even more than what the state is doing. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Is there any pressure on our end to be able to have those same standards, or do you feel like those are stretch goals that you don't have an idea yet?
Well, I'm not feeling any pressure, but it would be up to you and Commissioner Cafalas if you want to adopt that kind of thing as either a voluntary code or mandatory code, which I always try to make clear to people that ultimately I might brief you, but it's up to the elected officials to decide. So at some point we might want to have a conversation before we get into the formal review. Do we want to adopt just whatever the state does? Do we want to go beyond that? I think the stretch code that Fort Collins is doing is fairly ambitious, and I think there'd be a lot of political pushback in Larimer County if we went that far. but that might be, sometimes a stretch code is like, okay, if you do this code, then you get some points on affordable housing approvals or something. We might speed it up. We might save money. So there's ways to, encourage people to do that.
And just one more question, and then is with some of the electrification requirements that might come with the state code, or even with the City of Fort Collins code, I mean, what are the conversations like with the electrical providers? I mean, I assume that there's a robust conversation about how feasible that is.
Right? They've said, well, I've had some discussion with the Poudre Valley REA, and they say that they can handle it. There is actually, as part of our strategic planning and our climate smart process, there's a group that's talking about building electrification that I go to. I'm not the champion of that though, and that includes the electrical providers to see what it would take. Do they have the infrastructure? Do they need to upgrade the grid? Do they need to put in more transformers? So those conversations are happening. It's a concern of mine too, even though they've said they can handle it. Once everyone starts, or a lot of people start buying electric cars and electrifying their house, can it handle all this and upgraded? A lot of houses just have a 60 amp service. They're probably gonna have to go to 200 or 240 when they start doing these things. But those conversations are ongoing, and they say they believe they can handle it.
Okay, yeah, just curious about that, because I think if we required everyone to have heat pumps, it might not be as big a burden in Larimer County, because we don't see the kind of permits level that they probably see in the municipalities. But the municipalities, I mean, I'm glad I assume those conversations were happening. I'm glad to know that they are. But yeah, there's a lot to think about as we kind of move forward. But I do agree that the delaying 6 months, I mean, there's no reason to get together and talk about hypotheticals. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, Commissioner?
Okay. Thanks for your
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Eric, and that concludes the community development updates for today.
All right, Leslie Ellis again. I just have a few updates for you also. First off, some activities happening at the ranch, and we are scheduled to have Connor come out possibly next week. That might shift, but to give an update on the master plan and other programming and events at the ranch. But one thing he let me know, and I wanted to pass along to you, and he can share more next week. But it's Pride Month, and we are having the first Pride Festival at the ranch at the end of the month, and so that's very exciting new programming at the ranch, and very timely as well. So that's exciting. Sponsored by Northern Colorado Equity Organization on June 28th. And then so more from Connor soon on other ranch activities. As you're also aware, we're starting at the staff level to have some conversations about the Wellington Intergovernmental Agreement for Growth Management and Planning. You'll recall probably discussions with the trustees some time ago, and that's been a topic of interest from the town for some time, and they've reached out to us to initiate those conversations, and as part of your community development work plan, and Cody Bird from the town and Rebecca have begun those conversations as well. So we'll have more coming your way for conversation and input in the not too distant future on that as well. I'll just keep moving along. Please just chime in if you have questions.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally has a question.
Thank you. And that's really exciting news. I'm curious, with that joint conversation and stuff, is it, I don't know if it's appropriate or not to have maybe some members from both planning commissions to be over in those meetings and overhearing that, since we're talking about some things, and invite them so they feel like they're a part of the conversation too. I'm just curious about that, because I know they have a pretty active planning commission up there. I'm just curious about those conversations as well.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, and part of the conversation initially is to determine what the engagement schedule and process is, and then Lorenda and Patty will be coordinating around opportunities for conversations among elected officials as well. But typically there's some level of input from the planning commissions, and then input from the community as well as these agreements are developed. So thank you for that suggestion. Okay. The The other item, one of the items on your work session for Wednesday is an update and input on the water master plan or the water plan from Danielle. And so we have a technical group committee meeting this afternoon, and she's going to summarize the information that comes out of that and then share some information with you and the Planning Commission tomorrow. But that we're at the stage of the plan now where we're starting to develop implementation strategies. And so she'll be looking for sharing where we are with that process and then looking for your input on those topics on Wednesday. We have that, and we also have the land use code updates that evening. So those two topics will be in front of you on Wednesday. And then lastly, I had the fortune to attend a training with Lori Hodges along with Commissioner Stevens on Friday and Lori Kadrich for the Incident Command System disaster response training for emergencies. And of course, with Lori Hodges, it's always a fantastic session and I think a great precursor to some of the work that we'll be doing in August in Emmitsburg. So that was very helpful for me. So that is it for me for this afternoon.
Thank you, Leslie. Any questions or comments,
Yeah,
Commissioner?
I'm excited that you guys took that class. I think Commissioner Collins and I took it at City Fort Collins, same Lori training summit. Yeah, it's very, how she does it is very helpful to kind of think of it in a different way, and it makes it seem a little bit more structured, but in the term of chaos and disruption, it gives you a little bit of structure. So my question about well, first off, let me just also say, Danielle did such a great job at the Colorado Counties Incorporated Summer Conference for the Water Center, and I applaud the great work that she did. And also, just curious about the implementation and this plan. We'll be talking about implementation sometimes takes funding, so I'm curious about, do we have some numbers on that, or what does that look like, or is that built into that grant? And just curious about some of those items.
Yeah, thank you. We're just at the early stages of talking about what implementation may be for this plan, and so it could be a number of things. It could be seeking funding sources or developing funding sources for achieving certain parts of the plan. It could be code changes, and we've talked quite a bit about, land use code changes that address water conservation and landscapes and that sort of thing. It could be partnering with other organizations who are doing work in watersheds. So I think there's a range of possibilities that may play out under the different goals and ideas that are coming forward as part of the plan. So we're at very early stages. We don't have at this point a sense of what each of these items might cost, but that should come forward as part of the next conversation or next stages of the conversation.
Thank you. I'm really excited and tremendous, exemplary, innovative work. Just want to commend you and Danielle and everyone and all the people involved with this. Just really a great opportunity. Correct? Can you, my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, but since we became on the board, I know we had landscaping standards and some other things with the code as we're implementing. I think we did already I'm not saying there's more room for improvement, but didn't we already take a big step forward with kind of landscaping and water conservation and xeriscaping, and those kind of things were considered the last few years? And in this code updates and things we've been doing, we've already taken lots of really strong steps forward there. Is that my recollection?
We have taken some steps forward in, I want to say 2020 or 2021, probably, when we did that module of the code updates. We think there's probably still some room for improvement there, and maybe some room, some ideas that we weren't aware of at the time. And so Danielle will be doing some more work to research best practices and see what other organizations and communities are doing. We've had some conversations too about the county, potentially really being a clearinghouse for information about what various organizations in the region might be doing around this topic too, so that we can share with each other, because everybody approaches it a little bit differently, whether it's a larger community municipality or a smaller municipality or water district, and so there's potentially a lot of learning from each other too, and ways that we can really be as innovative and thoughtful as possible on this topic.
Sorry, I really like talking about water stuff. I actually was talking about water today with someone who constituent called me. So would that influence our IGAs that are currently in place, and would we consider suggesting to our partners or our current partners that we're working on current IGAs with to think about adding some of those things in those GMAs? Because I'm assuming our standards are not all on the same level. I'm sure I know they're all there, but I'm just curious how that is. That something we will look to add going forward, the ones we're currently working on, and then also having some retro or going back and revisiting some of these current IGAs, because I know all of our partners across the county are looking at some of these standards. I'm just curious about that work as well.
Yeah, so the way that our IGAs typically work is the county's land use standards, land use code standards still apply within those GMAs. Unless there is a rezoning that adopts specific standards from that municipality for a specific development plan. So any standards that we adopt as the county would still apply within those GMA areas unless they get annexed in. So we would have jurisdiction over landscaping in those areas.
Thank you for helping with my recollection. Appreciate that.
Okay. Is there anything else on the agenda?
Not for me, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for all the great information. A lot of things we're working on, so we know you're all busy, and thank you for your work. Since we have no other business, it's 2:16 and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.